Account distributions in CenterPoint are a way to distribute revenue and expenses to different management details such as profit centers, projects, or locations using a formula of some sort, usually a percentage. Distributions can take place at the time of a transaction, or if you're unsure of the exact allocation or think it could change, they can be distributed at a later time. This video will discuss how to distribute transactions at a later time. I will be using CenterPoint Accounting for this demonstration, but if you have CenterPoint for Agriculture or CenterPoint Fund, the steps to running a distribution at a later time will be the same. Some of the terminology might be a little bit different. If you're using CenterPoint Fund, a company is equal to a fund in your product. If you're using CenterPoint for Agriculture, a location is equal to a production center in your product. Distributions are set up underneath Setup, Accounts, and Distributions. Now there's a separate video that talks about the setup of the distribution, so I'm going to edit an existing distribution and go to the distribution detail. When you do set up a distribution, one of the things you need to define is the timing of the distribution, and your options are at transaction or later. If you choose at transaction, it means the allocation to those management details, these management details below, is going to happen within the transaction. So then the only way to edit them is to change each and every one of the transactions. If you choose the timing of later, then the details of how it gets allocated won't be determined until a later time. And to do that, we actually create a separate transaction in which the details of multiple transactions and multiple accounts will be allocated all at once. I'm going to cancel out of here. Now, one of the other things you do need to be aware of is underneath Setup and Company, when you define your company, on the Additional Detail tab of your company, one of the options is choosing your distribution frequency, and your options are monthly, quarterly, and annually. So if you choose monthly, it'll pick up all of the transactions for that month that had a distribution on them where the timing was set to later, and it'll create a transaction to allocate all of those at one time on a monthly basis. If you choose quarterly, it creates one transaction every quarter for the transactions in the quarter. And if you choose annually, it creates one transaction for all of the transactions throughout the year that had that distribution on them where the timing was set to later. The recommended option is monthly, and that's what we've chosen for this company. To run the distributions, you're going to go to Processes, Periodic, and Apply Distributions. You'll click Create New to create a new distribution. You'll choose your company or your fund if you're a fund accounting. You'll choose the transaction date, which is usually the end of that period, either the end of the month, end of the quarter, or end of the year. It'll have a sequence number on it that keeps incrementing unless you change the format of it. You'll be able to identify two memo lines and a notation for this transaction. And then when you click OK, it's going to allow you to preview the journal entry that's going to get created. So for the accounting expense, there was a total of $648 in transactions that were added during that month. So it's going to create a journal entry where it's going to credit that account with no details on it. So no profit centers, locations, or any of the other production or management details. Then it's going to reallocate it using whatever formula you have in that distribution. Now, if everything is okay, I could click Post and just go ahead and post the transaction. However, if you notice underneath my cost of goods here, I have some of my cost of goods right now going to skiing equipment. And it's the middle of the summer, so we don't have any skiing happening, and I don't want to allocate any of these to skiing equipment. So I still have the opportunity to edit it. So next to each account there, you have the opportunity to click the Edit button, and you can make some changes. If you had multiple percentages, you could change the percentages. You could open up a line and you could change the physical amounts on each one of those lines, or you could actually choose a different distribution. And that's what I'm going to do. I have a different distribution set up called cost of goods other season. So I'm going to select that. And if I open up the line, you'll notice that that one doesn't have any allocation to skiing equipment. So that's the one I'm going to use for this one. Now, another option that I have on this screen is to take the check mark out of using a distribution and leave it as undistributed. I'll click OK. And notice on this line, then it corrects it and it excludes the skiing equipment profit center. So once you have everything the way you want it, you can click Post. Now, at any time, if you do need to still change the distribution of one of those accounts, you can come back in here and you can edit it. And you can choose the edit button and you can choose, a different distribution or say that you don't want to distribute it at all. Now, if you had created the distribution transaction and maybe entered in a transaction later that should have been part of that distribution, you still can delete the distribution. And then if you delete it, you can click Create New to recreate it. Okay, so that allows you to include then that transaction that was entered at a later time. Now, I also want to point out that I'm saying to run this distribution at the end of the month, but I don't have to exactly run it at the end of the month. It just has to be dated at the end of that month. But I could wait several months before I come back and allocate those transactions out. I might want to wait until I know the specific details. You'll also notice that on the screen, I'm seeing distributions for multiple years. So there is a filter on the screen where you could filter so that it just shows you those distributions for this year. So I'm going to go to the filter. I'm going to choose transaction date. I'm going to say that I want only those that have a transaction date of this year to show up. Click Add to Filter, and I'll click Apply. And now I'm only seeing those that are for this year. And if I want that to be a permanent filter, I could go back to the filter tab and say that I want to save that as my default filter. If I want to get back to the other ones, I could always go back to the filter tab, say clear all, and then click apply, and then I would see the previous year's distributions as well.